This clip is from my conversation with Himani Naresh, a first-generation immigrant and tech executive turned nonprofit leader whose journey from being arrested over a $1.25 subway fare to graduating from Wharton and leading global teams shows how resilience actually gets built in real life. It sounds like this is a pretty important time for you. I mean, did you get, you had a goal going into business school. Did you get what you wanted out of it? Did you feel like you really gained those skills and the things that you needed to go back and be successful, or?
Yeah. So I would say with business school, and I think with any school, it's not necessarily always about the skills because you can learn everything online these days. And, you can take classes at a community college and you can learn how to code, or you can take an accounting class on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. But I think what school is really valuable for is learning how to break down problems. But more importantly, it's the network that you develop in school. And so I didn't appreciate it as much when I was in business school. And I went to Wharton, and it's a great school out in Philadelphia. I didn't appreciate it enough or value it enough at that time. But since then, I have tapped into my business school network like you wouldn't believe it. So I think every job that I've gotten in the last few years has been through my business school network. If I've ever needed anything, I've reached out to that network. And I think that's probably what's been the most valuable thing about, especially business school, is really the people that you are surrounded with and the people who come after you.
Did you jump right in when you showed up in Philadelphia to business school? Did you feel like, oh, this is like, I feel right here? Was there like a little bit of that
Oh
getting
no, it was
comfortable?
very intimidating. It was very intimidating because I was an engineer and I'm surrounded by people who worked at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. And I remember it's quite embarrassing to share this story, but I remember during our orientation, I walked to a bar in Philadelphia and I saw everybody mingling and networking. And then I turned around and walked right out and I walked back home because just the idea of trying to network and schmooze and make small talk with people I didn't know, it was quite terrifying. I've gotten over that, thank God. But yeah, it was quite an adjustment for me, especially coming from an engineer and going over to the business side. It's a very different type of person that you're working with or you're dealing with. And I think, a lot of people who come out from business school these days do go work for tech companies, working at, the big FANG companies, et cetera. I know that's a goal for them. So, but yeah, it was definitely something that I had to get comfortable with, that new world.
I'm glad that you called that out, because if someone looked at your experience on paper, I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, they accepted you into the school because they knew that you were qualified and smart enough. You had the experience, everything else there.
Yeah.
You had gone to a great school undergrad in Columbia. You worked at Microsoft in 1999 at the end of the dot-com boom. Microsoft's a great company there at the time, still are a great company. And then you showed up at this school, but still were dealing with these feelings of, oh goodness, maybe I'm not ready to be here, or, just only maybe some self-doubt.
Yeah.
And if you looked at you on paper, I think no one would think, well, that person would not have any reason to feel that way. But the reality is everybody feels that way. Everybody feels at some point like, oh, this is terrifying. I don't know if I should be here. These people are all better, smarter than me, or whatever. So yeah, I'm glad that you called that out. So how did you work through that? You went to school at some point. You didn't just, again, you made it through the next 2 years. So the orientation was a moment you're like, okay, back off here. But I mean, can you talk me through what?
Well, I think you have to find, wherever you go, you have to find your tribe, right?
Okay.
You have to find the people who are going to be your friends. We're going to walk into that bar with you next time, or who are going to be the first person that you go say hello to at that bar, or the people that you're going to be in your learning group with, the people that you're going to do case interviews with when you're studying for, your consulting interviews. Like, you just have to find your tribe. And I think that's like important in school, but that's important wherever you go, right? Like in your career, I have to find my tribe in my children's school. Like, who are the other moms who I relate to? I think like that is the key to everything. I honestly think that is the key to happiness, is finding your tribe. Whether it be your friends, the people in your family that you're most, you go to for help, whether it be people in your clergy or your church. It's finding those people who are going to support you and lift you up. And, I was very lucky in business school to find, a few people that I have made part of my tribe. And then I think as you get more confidence, right? Like, I graduated I think when I was 29, and I got married right after that. I think when you're in your 30s, that's really when you kind of, you kind of establish in yourself, and you understand who you are a little bit more, and you understand like, okay, I got to play politics in the corporate world a little bit, or I got to be a little bit more strategic in how I navigate myself, or I got to understand about like presenting my brand, or presenting like, figuring out which opportunities that I need to take. I think when you're in 20s, you just do what your boss tells you to do, but in your 30s, that's when you like really try to figure out like, okay, this is going to be helpful. This is not going to be helpful. This is the gap that I need to fill in my resume. These are the experiences that I need to get. I just had a baby, so I need to step back for a little bit, that type of thing. But yeah, I would say wherever you go, find your tribe, find the people who are going to help you.
I think that's really valuable advice. So you obviously found your tribe, part of them at when you were
Yeah.
in grad school. Were there any more of those moments where between between this moment of orientation and then feeling comfortable, where you remember walking into a room, or just, I mean, I guess, yeah, how did that happen? How did you go about finding? I feel like there's a distance traveled between those two moments, and I'm just curious if you have any more experiences that helped you get whatever you needed internally to be able to take the steps to travel that distance.
Okay, so I would say that a couple of the things that I did in business schools was we had this thing called leadership ventures. And two of the most profound things that I did was I did a leadership venture at Quantico, which is the military academy at
Oh
Washington,
wow,
D.C.
that's
And
cool.
I did a sailing leadership venture in the Caribbean, which sounds amazing. But I'm telling you, you learn so much about leadership sailing with a team of people through a storm, right? And I think that outside of like classroom work, being in those experiences just really helped me understand a little bit more of why I was here. I'm not here to learn about accounting or learn about how to create a marketing plan. Those are things that you can learn about on the job. I'm here
Mhm.
to develop myself as a person, to develop myself as a leader.
Wow.
And then putting yourself in those situations, like working in Quantico, spending a weekend in Quantico, it was only a weekend, but I left me with such a profound appreciation for our military. And one of the exercises that we had to do was all of us had to make our bed. And if one of us made our bed wrong, all of us had to undo making our bed, put everything back in the cabinet, and then put everything back out. And the whole point of that exercise was to teach you that one person's mistake really impacts the rest of the team, right? And everybody there was just so wonderful and so gracious, but so brave and so about the team and really helping each other. I remember we had to we were given fake rifles, and we had to wade through this little pond to get to the other side. And there was a snake in the pond. And one of the military people who are our hosts immediately jumped into the lake and took care of the snake, right? And I was just like, there wasn't even a second thought. It wasn't even like, let me go get a stick. Oh, everybody get out, let's secure the situation or whatever. He just jumped in and he took care of the situation. And I just think of like, that is the mentality that they probably have when they're in a combat zone. And they're just jumping in, unafraid to save the lives of, I'm sure it was an innocuous snake, but you know what I'm saying? But to like save the lives of the people around them, or to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I think like, and then like sailing through the Caribbean, you think it's a wonderful experience, and it was amazing. But I get a little bit seasick, and we had a couple of storms, right? And during that storm, we all had to work together to make sure that we were all safe. And all of us were like, I mean, this was like proper sailing with the jib and all that kind of stuff, right? And we're just out in the Caribbean. There's no like calling someone to get the Coast Guard to come get us. And we're sailing through a storm. And it was very clear like who the leaders were and who the followers were. And we just had to make sure that, everybody worked together to get through that storm. And so I think that was probably one of the most, those experiences where you build relationships with the people that you're with. And you understand what leadership is, you understand what your role is, and like, in any particular situation. I think those are the things that really are what's the most valuable takeaway through some of these like higher ed programs that people go through. I know there's
Wow.
a lot these days about people saying, in our politics and our culture, like, oh, education doesn't matter that much, and you can just learn a trade and all of that kind of stuff. And all of that stuff is true, and I support that, right? But I think that there's something to be said about taking a couple of years out and focusing on yourself and how you show up as a person, how you show up as a leader, building relationships, networking, understanding what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, etc. So it's not necessarily, again, about like accounting. It's just about, growing some of those softer emotional intelligence types of skills that I think really carry you forward in life.
I think there's so much truth in every single thing that you said.
Yeah.
And I think that finding some of those situations where you can put yourself, where you can, I think you can learn a lot about yourself by being in a stressful situation with a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton of self development and growth. And I could imagine that being really, really helpful. So what did you learn about yourself when you were in those situations? Is anything, remember? I mean, I can tell by your passion and the energy that you spoke with about those, that they were
hmm
really, really impactful. Is there anything that stands out from those experiences?
I think what I learned is that I want to be a leader that people want to follow. And that is not easy. Finding your true authentic self is something that's been a journey, not just through business school, but post business school. When I was young in my career, I was told that I had to fight for a seat at the table. And then when I started fighting for a seat at the table, people told me I was pushy and aggressive. So I was a little confused. I was like, I don't understand. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to behave? Right. So, and I think women, frankly, have to deal with that a lot more than men. But finding your authentic voice is something that I have had to work through and, just really examine myself and examine situations and look at not only like, hey, I'm really analytical. Yeah, but being really analytical can also be taken as it can be perceived as being negative, right? So I think one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
one of the things that you have to realize is that every one of your strengths can also be one of your weaknesses, right? If you're very determined, if you're very steadfast, that can also be perceived as stubborn. So just really understanding who you are, what your strengths are, what can they be perceived as, understanding things that you don't know where you're going to need other people to help fill in those gaps. Kind of, just it's not a one-time thing. It's not like I came out of business school and now I'm a wonderful leader and I can be, the CEO of a company. It is a journey. And then your kids, of course, throw you to the loop because the things that you do at work just don't work with your family or your children, right? So, yeah, I think like learning how to be a leader, learning learning about resilience, figuring out how you present yourself in the world, how you're perceived. It's all a journey and it changes over time.
You know what? Actually, before we move on, I have a question about just business school in general, what your thoughts are. I loved business school for all of the reasons you described. I learned a lot about myself. It provided opportunity. I love the network, the people, the friendships, the relationships that I made. Love the most. That said, I've thought a lot about, the opportunity cost and the value received from business school, how it would be now versus a bunch of years ago.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on if someone came to you and asked, "Hey, Himani, I'm thinking about going to business school. Could be, any school. What's your perspective on that now?" This was a short clip from the 4Fs podcast where I sit down with founders, veterans, and executives, world-class experts that you won't hear on every other show, to talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, and personal reinvention. For the full conversation and more context, tap the link in the description or search 4Fs podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you're enjoying these shorter episodes, make sure to follow along so you don't miss tomorrow's clip.
Welcome to the 4Fs with Jeff.